Goeienaand. Good evening, fellow South Africans from a beautifully warm Brisbane. Summer is here. Summer is definitely here. It's a lot warmer than it was in America. But getting back to the point at hand. Okay, this Sunday, 8 p.m. Johannesburg time. I know it's been a month since we last had a live stream, but hey, a guy's got to get away sometime. So, this Sunday, 8 p.m. Johannesburg time, we'll be having a live stream, and I'm still working on the subject, but it will include, in part, what the video that follows covers. And there's just two comments I'd make about the video that follows. And firstly, this is a shout out to Ria. Thank you for drawing this video to my attention. We have Afriforum on the one side debating an ANC fellow. He's an ANC candidate in 2019. And obviously their views are very, very different about Discovery, the new Discovery Bank. And this racist policy the bank has where only Africans can get a tiny percentage of the Discovery Bank. Now, it's quite clear to me that Discovery Bank is using this as a marketing ploy to say to Africans, hey, we're the only bank in South Africa that's really looking after you. It's a very smart marketing ploy, but it's clearly racist. And the only comment I would make about that is that, you know, they're offering 10% of the shares or the equity in this new bank, which doesn't have a branch, okay? There are no branches. It's only on a card, okay? It's only on a card. Now, that in itself is problematic, and I'll tell you why. It's problematic because the target market they're aiming at, which is the Africans, thus the 10% equity if they invest wisely and as a result get preferential interest rates, and it's a behavioral bank, which again is bullshit. Okay, it's total bullshit. But anyway, getting back to why their target market is so wrong, you need to have the internet and you need to have electricity to actually use this no branch card. You can't go into a bank branch and draw money. You've got to do everything online through a card. So think about the African population. 90% of the African population have absolutely no access to electricity at all. They live in these little shanty towns. They certainly would not be using the internet. So they're completely missing the mark of 90% of their own suggested audience, which is black Africans. So who are they targeting? They're clearly targeting the wealthier Africans who are now through affirmative action largely living like middle-class people, and they do have access to the internet, etc., etc., etc. So they're being very selective about who can actually bank with them, who can actually use their facilities. And that's a very, very important point to make, because they are not actually benefiting the majority of the black African population. They're targeting a tiny minority. All right, guys, I'll let you watch the video. It's quite an interesting debate between Ernst Roets and this ANC fellow. But before I do, remember to subscribe. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link to my live stream channel below, because it's a separate channel. It's not this channel. It's a totally different channel. So there'll be a link below. If you click on that and subscribe to that channel, you'll be alerted when I go live at 8 p.m. Johannesburg time and be taken directly to that separate channel. Okay, guys, have a lovely evening. We'll catch up soon and enjoy the video. Take care. Bye for now.
Welcome back to the morning show. Now, it was the much anticipated launch of South Africa's biggest medical aid scheme that was meant to impress, as Discovery announced that their new branchless bank would be open to the public by March next year. Billed as the behavioral bank, they have put an innovative spin on things by promising that the more you behave, the more your interest rates on savings go up, while the cost to borrow money goes down. However, there was one particular announcement that the new bank that it made, and that announcement made South Africans talking. Take a look at this.
The point was made at your launch that the likes of Solidarity and Afriforum push back against sort of race-based incentive programs. They were very cross with Sasol over the BE scheme there for staff and not for white staff members. Do you not face the risk of pushback there?
Look, I think we need to consult broadly and understand it deeply. We feel strongly with deep conviction it's a good thing to do. And we will have those consultations and those discussions, see where it plays out. But we'd like to do it. It's in our plan. The public launch happens in March 2019. And at that stage, we'll publish exactly the details of the scheme.
So essentially, the bank is saying it will give away 10% of its equity to black clients only. And here to discuss this further, Afriforum Deputy CEO Ernst Roets, as well as ANC Youth League presidential candidate and activist. In fact, he's an NEC member of the ANC Youth League, I should say, Ndumiso Mokako. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming through.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, so perhaps let's start with you, Ernest. How have you reacted to this announcement by Discovery?
Well, obviously we were very disappointed. I think South Africa, public discourse in South Africa has reached the point where it's not about transformation anymore, it's about transformania. And transformania is when you become so hysterical about counting white and black faces that you start losing your sense of rationality. And the fact that a large corporation like Discovery can so easily buy into this, where we've now reached the point, despite the fact that we are in the year 2018, where companies can use racism as a marketing tactic or the tactic of getting sales. I think it is highly inappropriate. I think it is a severe form of racism, particularly because of the fact that it is minority communities who do not necessarily have political power who are being targeted and excluded.
Why do you think this is a great, idea for a country that needs to correct the past imbalances?
Look, this is a brilliant idea, even though it will not make the desired impact. The reality of the matter is that in South Africa today, we live in a country where the majority of Africans are economically marginalized. We live in a country where the income of white household is 5 times that of black households. We live in a country where 67% of managers are still white, while only 14% are black. So we need these types of intervention to ensure that we increase the economic participations of Africans in particular and blacks in general. And we are not surprised by the reaction of racist formations like the Afriforum, who thrive on protecting white privilege, who thrive on protecting racism, to ensure that it is only white people who only constitute, just by the way, only 8% or 9% of the South Africa's population, but they continue to have a lion's share on the South African economy, which is undesirable. And I want to say to Ernest and make an appeal to him, and it's an appeal I've been making to Ernest for many years. Me and Ernest were student activists at the University of Pretoria around the same time, to say that you cannot build a united South Africa when you have majority of Africans in particular and blacks in general languishing in poverty.
And we'll talk about how we can build that united South Africa. But Ernest, given the realities that Ndumiso speaks about, the realities of black people, surely it cannot be business as usual. Is it not necessary then to look at, policies and how institutions craft their policies to make sure that they also try and reverse what apartheid was trying to do? You were speaking about the fact that this campaign it's actually it's a racism. They're using racism as a campaign tactic. But during apartheid, they were using race to make sure that white people are more privileged and they're more comfortable and they're more financially secure than black people. So surely it can be business as usual. Where do we put the balance?
Yeah, well, I think the point is that this scheme isn't doing anything to uplift poor black people. It's a scheme that, to use the Marxist terminology that the ANC use, it's a scheme that basically focuses on the bourgeoisie and making them richer. It's not on uplifting poor black people.
But it's still uplifting the black community.
Yeah, well, it's uplifting a section of the black community that do not necessarily need as much upliftment as other sections of the black community. And I think it's disingenuous to try to still make the argument that race is a proxy for disadvantage in South Africa. Yes, the majority of black people are, the majority of poor people in this country are black, and yes, it's disproportionately so. But it's very disingenuous for people connected to the ANC to make that argument. I can give you an example. Outside of this studio, there's 2 cars parked. There's a Suzuki Swift and there's a Mercedes A-Class 3rd generation. One of them belongs to me and one of them belongs to the gentleman sitting next to me. And the gentleman driving the Mercedes A-Class is trying to tell us that black people are poor and white people are rich. The point is that politically connected people are rich because they enrich themselves through schemes like these at the expense of the poor people.
Ernst, I mean, we speak a lot, and I'll give you a chance, Ndumiso, to respond to that. You've spoken about how the black community, you know, especially the bourgeoisie, doesn't need to be uplifted, doesn't need uplifting necessarily. It's the poor on the ground that need so. But I mean, if you look at the stats, it still shows that white men are still holding executive positions. I mean, the Department of Labor is always releasing such data. So for me, it says the structure is still not changing at the top. So there's still corporate racism, there's still corporate privilege that benefits white people. So this scheme, I would assume it's sort of developed to also try give an opportunity to, it may be the bourgeoisie, but at the end of the day, it's
as long as it's black people.
As long as it's black people, because it's black people that were disadvantaged in the past, isn't it so?
So would you then make the point that if white people were somehow to govern Zimbabwe now, that they can use discriminatory policies against black people because white people were discriminated?
No, they can use policies to try and bring black people on the same level field with white people.
Yeah,
because if there are no policies that are so radical, then how do we make sure that we are on the same level field?
Okay, well, let me answer you this way. So the ANC always talks about the triangle of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. And I think I don't think that, realistically speaking, we could attach equal weight to those 3, because there's been studies done that has found that society don't know, humankind doesn't know how to address the problem of inequality. Even under Fidel Castro, which is an ANC hero, inequality has increased in Cuba. You can look at the Gini coefficient under Fidel Castro.
Yeah.
Even the most communist, Marxist governments weren't able to solve the problem of inequality. So inequality is a reality. I think what we can solve is the problem of unemployment and the problem of poverty. And we can do that firstly by fixing the education system, because we know it's black schools in this country are more dysfunctional than white schools. We can do this by having proper economic and labor policy. So there's a lot of things that we can do, but simply giving out shares to black people who are already fairly wealthy won't solve anything.
But you agree that apartheid worsened inequality?
Well, you would have
blacks
to,
and white.
Look, I agree that apartheid was a discriminatory policy.
Let me assist Ernest. I think the problem with with racism is that it takes away all forms of rationality and takes a decent and educated man like Ernest into a degenerate. The reality of the matter is that South Africans in their majority are poor. Ernest cannot use an example of cars which we are driving, and just by the way, we are financing through banks which largely remain racist and sexist. This thing is extremely important for the ownership, control, and management of banks in South Africa. Just for your information, you must know that banks in South Africa are still racist. When they give black people loans, they charge them higher interest rates than their white counterparts under the guise of risk. They say it is much more risky to loan a black person because he's likely to be out of a job and difficult to find a job. Banks in South Africa are still largely sexist. They charge males, even black males, if you compare black males and black females, they charge males less interest rates than black women under the guise of risk. So Ernest can't come here and behave like a spoiled brat and throw around toys when he's when he's representing a race and a class which lives in security and comfort. And what is important to note...
We'll continue this conversation. Ndumiso and Ernest will continue with this, but I just want us to take a quick little breather, and then when we come back, we'll explore other issues around Discovery's decision to give 10% of its equity to black people. Do you have views around this discussion or questions for Ernest and Ndumiso? Send us your WhatsApp voice notes on 0724116528. We'll be back after this. All right, so we continue our discussion with Ernest and, of course, Ndumiso, who's an NEC member for the ANC Youth League. We've been speaking about the decision by Discovery to give 10% of the company's equity to black customers. And of course, this is a broad discussion, really. We're just using this as a reference point. But the issue here is Discovery is using this to sort of correct the imbalances of the past. Ndumiso, you were making a point.
Yes,
before we went for an ad break. I want to give you an opportunity.
Yes, I just want to start by saying I think I need to assist Ernst on educating, because if he does not receive this education here, he will not receive it anywhere else, because in the Afriforum they are only taught racism. The first thing is that inequality is not God-given or a natural phenomenon. It is created by the capitalist system in which we find ourselves in. In fact, there are countries that have done exceptionally well in reducing inequality. Brazil is an example. Under President Lula da Silva, he reduced inequality very significantly. So it can't be that Ernst misleads South African and says that we must accept that inequality is God-given and we are never going to get rid of inequality. He is saying that to justify and protect the reality that white people still want to live in privilege and comfort alone. The second issue that I want to correct Ernst on is that the truth of the matter is that the depositors of the bank are not the bourgeoisie. It's not only going to be bourgeoisie, it's going to be young professionals who are going to bank with that bank. And young professionals, young professionals, not bourgeoisie. You see, that's the problem. If you belong to an organization with no political theory, which does not teach you classes, because the bourgeoisie means people who own the means of production. It means people who own land like NS.
The middle class.
The middle class, look, the middle class are people who are exposed to debt. To be middle class, we must earn a particular income and qualify for debt. So the rest of the matter that these people do need this share scheme. And just by the way, it is just a drop in the ocean. The financial and services sector in South Africa constitute about 22% of our GDP, and there are very few black players, and we can't leave it unattended. We need to change the way it is managed. We need to change the way it is controlled, such that it represents the society we aspire to build, a united, non-racial, and non-sexist society. If we do that, if we do not do that, if we leave 22% of the GDP in the hands of a minority, which is about 7.8%, you are never going to achieve social cohesion and a united
Ernst, how do we build that united South Africa? What's Afriforum's view? You know, the ANC government, even some political parties are going ahead with, for example, issues around land expropriation without compensation, and they believe this is one of the ways to give black people their dignity back, and this is one of the ways to empower them as well. As Afriforum, how do we build that society where black and or white, you are united?
Yeah, well, you're not giving black people their dignity back if you enrich people who are politically connected at the expense of the poor, because that's what's happening in South Africa. The poverty, the crisis of poverty and the crisis of unemployment hasn't been resolved. It seems to have been worsening since 1994. So the problem is, and that's the problem with party politics overall, but particularly the problem with populist movements, is that they try to market quick fixes. They try to convince their voters to vote for them because they have this one policy idea, like expropriation without compensation or BEE. And if we only implement this idea, then we're going to fix everything.
Is poverty and unemployment only worsening after 1994?
It seems to be worse.
How come, Ernst, when we look at what apartheid has done and how, one, people had Bantu education, and I was asking you a question earlier about, do you think inequality was worsened by apartheid? And I think you said no to that.
Yeah, well, I don't know what the answer is to that question, because if the answer is, okay, maybe you can enlighten me. What was the state of black people before apartheid?
The first thing that
don't dodge the question. It's a straightforward question.
The first thing which must be fixed is that Afriforum and NS are used on triumphing on lies. He was part of the crusade that went around the world to say that there's black genocide in South Africa when we wanted to expropriate land without compensation, forgetting the reality that only about 70 farmers die a year compared to about 291 women.
You accuse me of lying, and then you lie in your argument.
You're a consistent liar, Ernst. But the reality of the matter now, what was the state of black people before apartheid? The state of black people before apartheid was the worst form of society which black people could have found themselves. This was even declared by the United Nations, which said that apartheid was a crime against humanity. So it can't be that Ernst today comes here and wants to speak of colonialism, come apartheid, as two separate things which did not discuss.
Not a reality.
What was the state before colonialism? How rich were black people before colonialism?
No, look, wait, before colonialism, we were a society which lived communally. The lives of our people were much, much better. And the reality at the time is that the people controlled their ways of living. Up until colonialists came to South Africa, and post-colonialism, they wanted to control how our people lived, and they legislated. It's not different. These things are interconnected. Society does not stop. And now the rate of them is that these people legislated the exclusion of black people from the exclusion of black people in economic participation.
Is that why? Is that not the reason why we are where we are? You know, the legislation and making sure through legislation that black people are excluded. And today, actually, South Africa is one of, in fact, at the top, the highest in an unequal society in the world. Everywhere. Is that not the reason, Ernest?
Well, it's one of the most unequal societies in the world.
It's actually top one. I was looking at the stats yesterday.
Well, it depends on how you calculate the Gini coefficient. There are different ways to calculate.
But is it not?
How do you calculate the Gini coefficient?
Is it the problem?
But Ernest, is South Africa one of the highest unequal societies?
Let's accept it's the highest.
Is the legislation of the exclusion of black people not as a result of that?
No.
How is it not?
It's not the only explanation, or it's not the full explanation.
Is it not part of the explanation?
It's part of the explanation.
So apartheid was responsible for, trapping black people not to have equal opportunities, not to have financial freedom, not to have good, proper education that white people were entitled to.
Yes, that was 30 years ago. So the question we should be asking is what has been happening in the last 30 years? Or
and 30 years is enough to somehow undo what happened?
Well, they're not undoing it. The point of... Let me give an example. This is what I'm trying to get to. It's not a controversial thing to say that there's a major difference between the quality of education in black schools and white schools. Statistics South Africa have pointed it out. It's a fact. And then you can look at what is the reason for this. Why are black schools failing and why are white schools succeeding? And there's been many studies. And the reasons include teacher absenteeism, teachers not showing up to teach, mismanagement by headmasters.
Yes, in black schools.
Let's correct the lie of
Let me finish the point.
Teacher absenteeism, mismanagement by headmasters, lack of community involvement, disruptions by unions, poor service delivery by government. None of these things have anything to do with discrimination by white people. All of these things are internal issues. So surely apartheid is part of the reason. But the fact that the education system is increasingly becoming a disaster, the worst in the world, according to polls, that's not being solved. And now they're trying to sell this quick fix. So we're giving literally the worst education to black people in the world. And now we're trying to have this quick fix on top by giving people shares, and now we're going to fix it.
I think it is also. I think Ernest is just a very disingenuous.
Quickly, Ndumiso, we don't have the time. I want to give you the last one.
The truth of the matter is that the underdevelopment in basic education in South Africa has got a historical context. One of those is that the apartheid government spent almost 16 times more on the education of a white child in a black school compared to a black school. The second reason is that even the teachers, black teachers were mostly trained in underdeveloped teacher colleges, while white teachers were trained at Wits, Stellenbosch and Potchefstroom universities, which were largely developed and they received better quality education. So the reality of them is not half a century we are lying. To 1993 is not half a century ago.
Okay,
now let's get to finalize the matter.
Look,
we must not be worried by people like Ernest. In our transformation agenda, they are doing all in their power to protect their privilege and ensure that they keep blacks out of the mainstream economy. And I assure you that they are going to be defeated in the future. We will have an economy which is owned, controlled by the majority of South Africans, which are Africans in particular.
What's Afriforum's position in trying to address the high inequalities we have in this country?
Well, we think that the focus should be on reducing poverty and reducing unemployment. The problem is not so much unemployment as it is unemployability. In other words, we need to fix the education system and we need to have labor and economic policies that make it easier for people to start their own businesses and to employ people.
Look, our agenda of reducing inequality and unemployment is in track. One of the things which we speak on in the issue of the financial services sector is the creation of a state-owned bank, which will ensure that young South Africans who want to start their businesses are not demanded collateral, for example, when the only thing they own is an RTP. Young South Africans who want to start businesses are not discriminated for, and their white counterparts who are rich are given interest rates or loans to start businesses at much cheaper rates. One of the things that we're also talking about is to say we need to look at the nationalization of mines in the Republic of South Africa to ensure that we take the proceeds which we make in the mining sector to develop the economy of South Africa. And the other issues to say, indeed, I agree, we need to improve the quality of education, but most importantly, improve access by having free quality higher education in South Africa.
Okay, Ernst, I just want to give you the last word then. Give me two sort of positions by Afriforum or even policies that have black people at the heart and they're in the interest of black people.
The question must be South Africa, not black people.
Afriforum.
A position that is South Africa at the heart, not black people.
Well, the majority of people that were disadvantaged are black people, and I'm very specific with that because, Ernst, you've said that your organization is fighting for inequality. You say you've got plans to also address the high inequalities we have in the country. Give me two policies that have the black people at the heart of your plans to address this highest inequality.
Well, I have to say I take offense at the question. The fact of the matter that you somehow have to justify your existence by stating what you do to promote the interests of one particular race.
That's the interest of one race that was disadvantaged because of the policies of apartheid, which favored white people.
I have children who are today older than I was when apartheid ended.
But they are more privileged than my children.
No, they are
who are
not.
in
Okay,
Mpumalanga.
tell me more about my children and how they are privileged.
Well, they are raised. No, hold on, Ndumiso. Your children are privileged because we're living in a country where there's white privilege. We're living in a country where white privilege is you now walking. Ndumiso, hold on. I'll give you a chance to also.
It's important.
Okay, go first.
It's funny that you are complaining that you're not getting enough.
No, hold on.
You are interrupting me every
The
time I
problem in South Africa, white privilege, is the fact that today in South Africa, when you go to a bank and you are a young professional, even if you are you will get a house at a much higher interest rate than a white privilege. Look, no. That's white privilege.
That's an example.
No. Ernst, white privilege is a society which continues to favor people based on their race, and in this instance, it favors white people.
All right,
and
look,
that favors you. Me and you went to the University of Pretoria. Me and you went to the University of Pretoria. We know white privilege.
I have to hold you.
I stayed in Kayata. I stayed in Kayata. You stayed in an affluent residence at the University of Pretoria.
Ndumiso, I need you to just give me a chance here.
And you own land. I don't own land.
Which land?
Please,
which land do I own?
Please, guys, I'm in charge of the interview. I'm asking you to come down so that we can... we're running out of time. But Ernst, I was asking you about white privilege. And one of the examples I'll give you is that for a black child who's living in deep rural Mpumalanga, doesn't have the better chances of getting the perfect good education that your white child would get either in Joburg or in Pretoria. You were speaking about how there's this differentiation between poor black schools and white schools that seem to benefit white people. Why? Because most of them can afford those schools. And I'm saying to you that my child doesn't have the privilege your child has because he's not getting the best education. No. He's not going to get to tertiary because there's not necessarily money for registration. When he goes to apply for a job as Discovery, he's not going to get a chance to be in management because, as I told you, the Labor Department has released data that shows that white people are still occupying executive positions.
You're a TV host and I'm a civil society activist.
And I'm asking you then, give me two policies, because you say you understand the struggle of black people and you believe in addressing the imbalances of the past. Give me two policies that are at the heart of Afriforum. What are you doing at Afriforum to try?
I can give you many examples.
Give me two. No, I'm asking for just two.
I can give you 20 examples.
Two.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Don't go to 20.
Well, we are currently involved in a legal case against the South African government involved to build a school for the community, the black community of Nkandla. Why? Because they've been promised a school by your government for 20 years. They're not getting that school. It's little children, 5 years old, black children, walking through a river every day, 20 kilometers, don't interrupt me, 20 kilometers to go to school. We are going to court on their behalf. Another example, we went to court on behalf of the black community.
You're going to court to get what government to build them the school?
To build them the school that they've been promising.
So that's not an Afriforum position because you are not necessarily as Afriforum using your funds to build them the school.
We're using our funds.
Their interest.
No, I'm asking about what you're doing directly.
Not about uplifting the lives of black people, but their interest.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how racist would it be if I asked this gentleman what are they doing to uplift white people? Poor white people.
Do white people need upliftment?
Yes.
After years of apartheid
I'm not
and
saying all
privilege.
white people need upliftment. I'm saying poor people need upliftment.
White
They are
people
poor.
have been privileged during apartheid.
Will you
and
give me
Esther,
an
you're telling
opportunity
me.
to answer your question?
And there are a lot that what the government is doing to
I'll
uplift
answer the
white
question
people.
when you give me an
All right.
opportunity to answer.
Listen, guys,
No,
unfortunately,
you're not going to cut me off.
I have to because none of you are giving me.
Okay. This is not
No, no,
Let me answer your
this,
question.
no, no,
this is
no,
what white supremacy does.
Listen,
you
Ndumiso,
invite
Ernest,
a
I'll give you a
person,
chance.
you
Ernest, I'll give you a
invite
chance. I'll give you a
person, you
chance.
host him,
No, no,
he wants to behave as if this is his kitchen.
hold on.
This is not your
Ernest,
kitchen, Ernest.
I'm going to give you a
It's
chance,
your
but I'm also
kitchen.
not going to allow you to point at me.
I'm
and say,
sorry,
listen,
I'm
Yeah, it's very disrespectful.
I'm not going to allow you to
It
do
is the
that.
nature of white supremacy.
And then because you
He's
guys are
pointing
not,
at you because you're black.
you guys are
If
not
you're
giving
white,
me a
you're not going
chance
to
to
do that.
continue.
Don't
Unfortunately,
be
that's where we're
racist,
going to leave the conversation
sir,
now. I'm hoping that
sir,
we're going to
this
have
is not
some
fair.
time
This is not fair.
before 8 o'clock. I've given you a chance to speak, Ernest.
not giving me
I've
a
given
chance.
you Ndumiso to speak.
No, because you're
I want us to
misinterpreting
take a quick break, and you guys
Give
can
me
sit
30
and
seconds.
discuss if you want to listen to me ask the questions, because for now, you are taking control of the
me
interview.
10 seconds.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll try and see if we've got more time to continue this discussion. Give us your views, questions, 072411 6528. The morning show continues after this.